This is a podcast of the Radcliffe Department of Medicine. Professor Graham Ogg talks about the role of our skin as a barrier against infection. Hello, Graham.
Hello.
How does the surface immune system on our skin stop pathogens?
There's many levels which the skin stops pathogens. The first is the structural barrier function of the skin. We know that when we scratch ourselves, that acts as a focal point for infection. So the structural, physical presence of the skin is very important. But some pathogens will get past that point, and that then activates components of the immune system. And that's split into the innate and adaptive immune responses. The innate immune response is ready to go in the skin. It can work very quickly and it works very broadly against different types of pathogens. And there are molecules that are important in the innate immune system and cells that are important. The molecules include antimicrobial peptides, which can bind and inactivate different viruses and bacteria and fungi. And in fact, these are being harnessed for new potential antibiotic treatments in the future. Cells of the innate immune system include macrophages, natural killer cells, neutrophils, and these all have broad anti-pathogen effects. But sometimes the pathogens get past the innate immune system, and that's when the adaptive immune system is activated. And this is a very powerful component of the immune response. It's very specific, so an immune response to one bacterium won't be effective against another bacterium. It's highly specific but very powerful. It's very costly for the host to make such an adaptive immune response, but nevertheless, when pathogens have passed these various levels of defence, it is activated and helps control the further replication of the pathogen. And again, there are molecules and cells that are important. Molecules are, amongst others, include antibodies, and antibodies bind pathogens, bind bacteria, bind viruses, and that inactivates them. And cells of the adaptive immune system include T cells and B cells. These cells help coordinate all aspects of the immune response, both the adaptive and the innate immune response.
And what happens when these mechanisms don't work anymore?
Well, that's one of the areas that we're investigating. One area of interest in our laboratory is the pathogenesis or the cause of eczema. It's becoming increasingly clear that one of the first steps in somebody developing eczema is that there might be relative barrier dysfunction of the skin. And so if there's barrier dysfunction, then infections and allergens can enter the skin and induce an immune response, which then causes the inflammation in the skin, which the patient notes as an inflammatory rash. These are really important questions because by understanding all the steps in the pathway through to the disease that the patient's experiencing, one can identify new potential points at which we can intervene and treat.
And can this research help us design vaccines?
Yes, as you know, many vaccines are delivered into the skin, or at least just beneath the skin, and by understanding the skin immune system, we hope to be able to inform new approaches to vaccination in the future that might enhance vaccine response in the future.
And what's the most important lines of research that have developed over the past 5 or 10 years?
I think actually it would be this recognition of the importance of the skin barrier in eczema disease. Until 5 or 10 years ago, the prevailing belief was that it was the immune system that was primarily contributing to the disease, that differences in how people handled different challenges would explain why some people developed eczema and other people didn't. But now there is this recognition that if there's barrier impairment, then infections and other challenges can get into the skin, and actually the immune response that we're observing may be an entirely predictable and expected immune response in the skin. It illustrates, I think, the importance of understanding these steps, because most of our treatments for eczema and for related diseases such as asthma and hay fever target the immune system. And it may be that we're missing a trick here, that we should be targeting the skin, the barrier function of the skin, and also the lungs and the bowels as well for food allergy, as well as targeting the inflammatory response. And I think in the next 5 or 10 years there'll be new treatments which are focused more on targeting the linings, the skin and the lungs and the bowel.
So why does your line of research matter? Why should we put money into it?
Eczema is very common. It affects 20 to 30% of children, and as I said, is associated with asthma and hay fever and food allergies. And these carry an enormous burden for families, children affected, and also an enormous health economic implication for the NHS. So these are very broad, common diseases of which there is an unmet clinical need.
And how does your research fit into translational medicine within the department?
The research that we do is very close to the patient. So I'm a dermatologist and I see patients each week, and with patients' consent they kindly give samples, blood samples, for which we analyse the immune response, and the findings that we develop in those studies we then translate back to new clinical studies for the patients.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.